heard of what is happening in Ukraine? Of course you have. But have you forgotten what has been happening in our backyard? Remember the news of a coup, a stringent crackdown on democratic forces, and a human crisis. Remember Myanmar? On February 1, 2021, the world was easing from the onslaught of the first wave of the pandemic and was mostly unaware of the upcoming second wave. But in Myanmar, there was something else brewing. In a video that has since become iconic, an aerobics instructor was conducting her daily routine on video, blissfully unaware of the swarm of black SUVs in the background. In what became the first visuals telling the world that all was not well with the fragile democracy of erstwhile Burma, now known as Myanmar. A few hours later, the worst fears came true. The junta, who had been in power for decades before ushering in democracy, had returned. The coup was back, and what has followed since then is a defeat of democratic forces, but a win for humans rising above nationalities to help each other. I am Megha Thakuria, and in today's episode of Decoded, we look at how Mizoram stepped up to support their own people from Myanmar.
For months.
The village of Assam.
In the 75th Independence Day.
In 1962, a military coup led by General Ne Win abolished the federal system in Myanmar, which gained independence in 1948 and inaugurated the Burmese way to socialism, nationalizing the economy, forming a single-party state and banning independent newspapers. It was not until 1998 that the first steps towards democracy were taken officially. About 300 members of the opposition party, the National League for Democracy, were released from prison. But progress remained slow. In 2007, the so-called Saffron Revolution, widespread anti-government protests that were sparked by fuel price hikes and named after the saffron-colored robes worn by participating Buddhist monks, broke out. Faced with international pressure, the junta began to loosen controls, believing it could continue to rule Myanmar even if it stepped back slightly. It also possibly wanted to attract investment and reduce its reliance on China. It pushed forward a new constitution in 2008, which is still in place today, that gave military widespread powers even under civilian rule. The military junta officially dissolved in 2011 and established a military-dominated civilian parliament for a transitional period, during which former army bureaucrat and Prime Minister Thein Sein was appointed president. In 2015, Myanmar held its first nationwide multi-party elections. Suu Kyi's opposition, NLD party, won a landslide victory. New lawmakers elected Thin Shaw, a long-time confidant of Suu Kyi, as president. But the real power was in the hands of Suu Kyi, who was appointed to the newly created position of State Councillor and became the de facto head of the civilian government. However, the Myanmar military, also known as the Tatmadaw, retained the control of domestic security, most aspects of foreign relations, and many other matters related to domestic policy. In February 2021, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing and other military leaders staged a coup after the military's proxy party, the Union Solidarity and Development Party, suffered a major blow in the 2020 elections. The junta officially called the State Administration Council detained and charged de facto civilian leader Sa Suu Kyi with corruption and other crimes. It placed lawmakers from her party, the National League for Democracy, and other parties, as well as many activists, under house arrest. What has happened since is coup 101. International agencies and associations condemn the coup. China shows support for the coup. Sanctions are put in place, dissent is brutally suppressed, and the world watches a human crisis unfold before quickly moving on to another issue. And as neighbors, India has seen this firsthand. After all, India became one of the first places to receive refugees within weeks of the coup. As early as March, about 20 police personnel crossed into India saying they don't want to take orders from the junta. Mind you, this is not the first time India has taken Myanmar refugees. Before this, the Rohingya crisis had also resulted in thousands of refugees fleeing state persecution and coming to India. Which brings us to India's rather complex history with handling refugees. India is a land that has welcomed people from across the world since time immemorial. From welcoming Parsis in the 7th century from Iran to becoming the de facto home of Tibetans fleeing Chinese occupation in the 50s and 60s, India has always been home for many ethnicities and religion. Yet curiously, India remains one of the few countries that has signed neither the 1951 United Nations Refugee Convention or its 1967 protocol, which has 140 signatories, an overwhelming majority of the world's 190-odd nations. India has stood up when it comes to accepting refugees and has one of the biggest refugee population in South Asia. But it is precisely the large numbers that enjoin upon India the duty to enshrine in law how these refugees will be treated. Without any domestic law or regional South Asian framework, India has desisted from taking its rightful regional leadership role in this increasingly critical matter. As to why India won't sign the convention or the protocol, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees won't officially say why. But the reasons are of course security related. As you may be aware, borders in South Asia are extremely porous and any conflict can result in a mass movement of people. This can have two results. First, a strain on local infrastructure and resources in countries that are poorly equipped to deal with sudden spikes in population. Second, it can upset the demographic balance, a tinderbox in South Asia. Another argument is that India already does its duty, so where's the need to sign this piece of paper? It mostly doesn't even take UN money to look after the refugees. Mizoram was the first Indian state to make it public that they would not stop their brothers and sisters from Myanmar should they seek refuge in India. As of February 2022, Mizoram alone accounted for over 24,000 refugees from Myanmar, who have been welcomed with open arms. The refugee children have been enrolled in local schools, the youths and adults have been given some work as and where possible, and the state civil society has played a stellar role in ensuring they do all that is possible for the refugees, doing all this while also battling the raging second wave of the pandemic. The Mojo community considers the Chin state bordering India and Myanmar to be their close brethren. The Indian side has not forgotten the years of the Mizo struggle during the 1960s and 70s, when Chins across the border that provided them refuge from the bombing of the Indian Air Force and reprisals of the Indian security forces. There is a history of intermarriage and family kinship on both sides of the border, and also the ability to understand the Mizo language. The refugee status in Mizoram is explained further in EastMojo's documentary titled Myanmar Coup: Life at Refugee Camps in Mizoram. For now, however, we can say that thanks to the efforts of Mizoram, several refugees have found hope amid despair and a reason to smile amid all the pain inflicted upon them. But officially, we remain unsure about our stance.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to EastMojo. For any queries, put them down in the comments section below and press on the bell icon for notifications.